So let's get started. For those that are on time, we appreciate you tuning in on time, so let's get started on time. The talk we're going to do today is called, or we affectionately call it, Email Ninja, or the art of being an email ninja. The objectives of the talk are, we find that a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people in general are not great at email. They send a lot of email, it doesn't always get opened, it doesn't get actioned upon, and over the years we've come up with some really solid techniques of how to break through on email, how to get your email read, and how to get those actions taken. So we're going to roll this talk in a minute that's all about Email Ninja. So a couple things I wanted to point out. We pre-recorded this talk yesterday. I'm going to roll it off my Macintosh and stream it over to you. The reason why we pre-recorded it yesterday, and we'll do questions afterwards, so I'm going to be around for questions afterwards. The talk is going to take about 30 minutes. We believe content like this has really great value, so we want it to have a little higher production value. We want it to look great. So if you want to come back to the content later, point other team members towards a webinar, for some of our content like this that we have the chance to pre-record it, we do because we want it to have a better look and a better experience for you when you're going through it or other team members are going through it. Please note that we do panel discussions, and we're going to do a whole bunch of panel discussions throughout this Dreamit cohort. Those are all going to be done live. But again, some of this, this type of content we can re-record so it looks a little nicer. Like all of the webinars and content, all of it will be up online within 48 hours, and we'll post to Slack where you can find that and when you can find it. And please note, like presentations for today, we post the slides for the presentation separately as well. It'll be up as a PDF. So if you want access to the slides themselves and you don't want to hear the whole video again, we'll have the slides for the presentation available to you as well. Many of our presentations are written in very checklist format, so it makes it really nice to kind of go through them as a checklist. So we'll have that online as well. So we're going to roll this talk right now. We're going to hold to the end for questions. Talk is about 27 or 28 minutes long. At the end, so if you can just mark down your questions as we go through it, that would be great. At the end, in Zoom, we're going to use that raise your hand feature like we used yesterday, and we'll bring panelists up. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer your questions. Just give me a minute. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to start rolling this. When we do this and I share my screen, I should be able to still voice over while I'm doing it. I'm going to share my desktop. One moment, and we should be good to go. And we're going to roll Email Ninja now, and I'll be back for questions. Hi, I'm Steve Barsh from Dreamit, and today I wanted to take you through some really advanced techniques that we love entrepreneurs to use. It really shows you how to break through via email. So much communications you're going to be doing with customers and investors is via email, and we find most people are really not that great at it. So we want to show you some great techniques that we've developed over the years to help you break through and get those meetings and important discussions started that you really want. The goal of this presentation is get you to be an email ninja. So this presentation and discussion is based off of some observations going into this whole discussion. First, most people will openly complain that the amount of email they get is just absolutely overwhelming. And it's really, we find, unlikely to get a response from someone if they really don't know you. If you're sending a cold email, just so many people get so much email, they tend to not be likely to respond. Also, people don't know how to get an email opened, read, and acted upon. So these three critical things, we want to make sure when you're sending an email that it's going to get opened by the reader, they're actually going to read it and take the action that you're looking for. So when breaking through on email, the first thing you need to do is break the ice. So before you're even going to email, we want you to establish some name recognition with the recipient. So before you're going to send an email, we want you to do some things in advance. The first thing that we think is really important to do is send a LinkedIn invitation to connect. So what you're going to do is you're going to link in with them on LinkedIn, then you're going to send your email. Now, if you're going to be using LinkedIn, and I'm sure you're going to be using it, a couple of important things. First of all, remember to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is very rich. Is your picture there, and is it sometime from within the last 5 or 10 years that actually looks like you? Are all of your positions there? Are the descriptions really thorough? All of your roles really thorough? Your educational information? You want to make sure that profile looks really rich because you're going to start putting this social capital to work. Additionally, you want to connect like mad on LinkedIn. So we spend a lot of time at Dreamit. We're always linking in, because the more people you link into, let's say you're a healthcare company or an ed tech company, and somebody receives a LinkedIn invitation and they see they have 3 or 4 people in common with you, it's much more likely they're going to link back to you. So you start building that energy within LinkedIn. Also, when you're going to send a LinkedIn invitation, a really critical point is you need to make sure that you send a relevant and specific introductory note. If you see the example up on the screen, this just isn't the, hey, I'd like to link in with you on LinkedIn. It's a very specific note that we've written to make sure that this person responds to this request. We find your acceptance rate on LinkedIn skyrockets when you do things like this. An important note about LinkedIn and sending LinkedIn requests like this is we find today that if you use the apps on an iPhone or an Android device and you just say, oh, I want to connect, it automatically sends the LinkedIn invitation and you have no opportunity to do a custom message like this. Currently, you must use the web platform of LinkedIn to do these custom messages, and again, we find that makes your invitations very, very effective. Additional things that you can do to break the ice with people before you even send, again, before you send your first email, follow them on Twitter, you comment on the blog, you're doing all of these things before you send your email, so they're going to know about you before you send the actual email for the meeting that you want or the introduction that you want. As many of you may realize, if you're going to connect with them on LinkedIn, how do you know what their email address is? Because LinkedIn will say, how do you want to connect? And it'll say like other, and you put in their email address. Where do you get their email address? Now, a lot of Dreamit companies, once they get kind of into the Dreamit way, almost it's like a challenge of ripping the ears off the bull. They won't even say, they'll say, you know, don't even give me the email address. I'm going to figure it out for myself. And it's really pretty easy. So you can do it by the contact info tab on LinkedIn. Sometimes people will put their email address right on LinkedIn, and you can use that to unlock and link in with them. You can search for their CV or their resume. There are a number of contact search tools that you can use. Data.com is one of them, and there's all kinds of CellHack. There's all kinds of tools to get email addresses. One technique I tend to use a lot is I follow the format of other people's email addresses at a company or institution, and I use an add-in called Reportive, which is like a Google Chrome add-in. If you put the email address in, it'll show you if it's the correct email address. It'll resolve it for you. Or you can try things like Twitter name, Gmail, Yahoo, and take their Twitter name and just add a Gmail or Yahoo, because you're looking for their email address. Again, because if you're trying to break the ice via LinkedIn, you need their email address to actually send that contact request. Again, I find most of the people at Dreamit, 95% of their time, in a minute or less, they can figure out what that person's email address is. So even if you don't have a warm intro, you can self-intro using these techniques and starting with LinkedIn. Now that we've talked about how to break the ice with things like LinkedIn, let's talk about actually sending the actual email. The first step in sending a really great email is making sure that you have a super compelling subject line. Let's review some do's and don'ts of having great subject lines, because if you don't have a great subject line and no one ever opens your email, it's all for naught. So let's talk about some don'ts first. The first thing in the don'ts is don't be generic and nondescript. I get emails all day long. It says intro or introduction or referral, and it's really kind of generic. They tend to get opened less, and we find that true across the entire community of Dreamit companies. That if you send these really weak emails, they get very little to no response because they're never opened if the subject line is really not compelling. Don't ever leave an email subject line blank. My personal rule is if you send me a blank subject line email, I just delete it. So make sure that you don't do these things. So let's make sure that you do the good ones on the other side of the slide. So some of the really critical things, first of all, in the do side, make sure that you have a really newsworthy hook in the subject line of your email. What's compelling about it? What's interesting that I should open your email? Think of it almost like writing a headline at a news organization. What's that newsworthy hook? And what's that strong reason to open your email? A lot of times what we'll do at Dreamit and suggest that companies do is they start with the recipient's name in the beginning of the subject line so they know it's that recipient's action. Just to go a little further on that, what I'm talking about there is I've seen a lot of large organizations, they'll have 5 people on the to line, 10 people on the CC line, and nobody really knows if they have to open the email and deal with it. So one of the things that we love to do is I'll actually put the person's name, like in the example below. It says Beno, referred by Despina. Beno is the person's name. It's right in the beginning of that subject line, so you know it's their action to open. The last thing that we like to do is if you're doing a referral, or you're going through a referral, make sure to add the referrer's name. Again, like in the subject example that you see below, Beno, referred by Despina. We're putting that in there because we want to make sure that the subject line is compelling, it's credible, and it'll have a high open rate so we can break through to this individual contact that we're trying to reach out to. The last thing I wanted to point out is realize that about over 50% of the time, the first place your email is going to land is on someone's smartphone. And if it lands on someone's smartphone, that compelling subject line is even more critical. So think about that on a smartphone. You'll usually only see about the first 30 characters of the subject line of that email address. You're just one finger swipe away from getting deleted for your email. So just think about when you're sending an email, you want a really compelling subject line. Those first 30 or so characters are really, really critical to make sure that email is going to get opened, actioned upon, and most importantly, not deleted or not ignored. Now that we've talked about how to break the ice and have a really compelling subject line,
my broadcast, this is frozen?
You're seeing it's going out, but it's not going out to everyone else.
Okay.
So the best thing to do is interrupt. You have the deck, you can do it live.
Okay.
That's what we should do because we're having problems.
Okay. So where should I start from?
Just interrupt, just stop.
Let me stop sharing.
And just
coming back, understand that people are having problems. It's not streaming, so I'm just going to do it live from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, give me a minute, and I'm going to do it live. And I'll try to go through it quickly. My apologies, all. Hold on 1 second. Let me bring up that presentation, and you get to hear it live. And hopefully I won't pause. Hold on 1 sec. One sec. Let me just bring up the presentation. One moment. One second. Let me just finish this up and make sure I have the right version up in front. Just give me a moment to finish getting this information up. One sec. One moment. Just want to make sure I have the right version up for you. Here we go. Just loading it to my Macintosh. Our apologies. Be with you in one moment. Here we go. Let me switch to share my screen. This desktop, screen share, presentation, up, loaded, and you should be. And Douglas, if you're there, can you just confirm that you can hear me and you see the screen slide in front of you? Because we're going to get started here. Apologies for the technical difficulties. One sec. Let me just make sure Zoom is running correctly. Great. I'm talking, and we're just going to go to that. OK, and Douglas, can you hear and will you be able to see that? So I'm going to get rolling if you do.
You're good, Steve.
OK,
great. Your desktop.
All right. OK, sorry about that all, guys. I'm going to go quickly through some of the intro stuff. I don't know where it froze, but my apologies. So let's talk about breaking through an email. Actually, let me add one thing in here. Why are we doing this talk right now? I wrote a note as I was listening to the talk. And this is a very tactical technique to start with as we talk with everybody at Dreamit. The reason why is coming up, you're going to have customer immersions. You're going to be meeting with a lot of people. You're going to get a lot of intros from us. And you're very quickly going to be sending a lot of emails related to customers and people that you've never met with before, just warm intros. So we wanted to go over this technique right now, really early, so you can start using this technique immediately for all these intros that are coming and the meetings you're going to have. So that's why we're going over something so tactical right now. It's not overly strategic, but it's it'll make a huge difference on your effectiveness on email. Okay, goal of this talk, make you into an email ninja. The observations and where this all comes from, in case you didn't hear it when I was doing the recorded one, and we'll work on that in the future. The problem is email's volume is overwhelming.
Right when he did, what did he do to us?
Douglas, I can hear you. If you can go on mute, please. So the email volume is overwhelming, and it's really hard to break through. I know people that get hundreds, if not 1,000 emails a day, and unless you've got a great email to somebody that's the first time you're talking to them, chances are it's not going to get opened. So I find a lot of people aren't great at Sending email that's going to get open, get read, and most importantly, get acted upon. Okay, first thing before you send an email, our big suggestion is break the ice. So if you're sending and emailing someone you've never talked to before, you've never met with before, or it's just a warm intro from somebody at Dreamit, a great thing is break the ice and use your social capital from within LinkedIn. So that's what we like to do. So our suggestion is going to be to you, and some people have been doing this to me at Dreamit already from the inbound companies, send an invitation from LinkedIn. That means please make sure you have your rich LinkedIn profile ready, your pictures in there, your LinkedIn profile is up to date and nice and rich. You should really connect like mad inside your industry, because the more connections you have, you'll start reaching out to people and they'll notice there's 16 common connections. They're much more likely to accept your connection request, which means they're much more likely to accept your email. When you send that LinkedIn intro request, a big suggestion we like to make is make sure you include a relevant and specific introductory note. If you notice here, this just wasn't a standard, oh, I'd like to link in with you on LinkedIn and build my social network. We always include small personalized notes. You don't have a lot of room in LinkedIn to write something long, which is great. A small personalized note that gives the relevance of why you're linking into them. It just makes it much more effective, and you'll get much better response. Sometimes we find, people do well by following them on Twitter, commenting on blog posts. Again, you're trying to build the relationship with the person using different types of social media and break the ice before you send the email, so the email is going to get opened and break through. And the reason we talk a lot about things like this is people like myself and a lot of Dreamit entrepreneurs are usually trying to deal with the senior vice president, executive vice president, CEO level, very high level in organizations. So you have to be killer at email to get through to these great people. When you're doing this on LinkedIn, one of the important things you need to be able to do is find people's email addresses. At Dreamit, within the Dreamit portfolio and community, it almost seems like it's a sport. You know, we're instead of saying, well, can I get that person's email address? I need, for the intro, could you please send me their email address? It's so easy to find people's email addresses. In most cases, you almost don't even need to ask. So you can do the work yourself. It usually just takes about a minute. Sometimes on LinkedIn, people will put their email address right on their contact info in LinkedIn. Easy to search for people's CVs or resumes. There's lots of great contact search tools like connect.data.com and CellHack, which is really easy to get people's email address. One of the things I like to do inside Google Chrome is I use an add-in called Reportive. And that lets me that when I'm sending an email from Gmail, if I type somebody's email address in, it'll resolve the email address and tell me if I have the correct email address. And if I do, it'll show me their LinkedIn profile. Another technique you can try is people's Twitter name and then just add in Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail if you're trying to find a personal email address. The whole point on finding these email addresses is to unlock LinkedIn, because when you send that connection request, you need to put their email address in. So it's relatively easy. It's to find people's email address using these types of techniques. A quick note and a quick reminder, in this presentation I'm going through, by the way, we'll post the webinar, the recorded one, we'll have it up on YouTube, so it'll be easy to stream to yourself. And just a reminder that this slide deck I'm going through, we'll post the slides by themselves, by the way, without the video voiceover, so you can watch and go through the information either way, because I know I'm going kind of quickly because I'm trying to catch up on our time frame. Okay, so you use things like LinkedIn to break the ice. Now you're going to write an email. First step, you have to have a killer, compelling subject line. We find that a lot of people don't have great subject lines. They have kind of crappy, generic subject lines like intro or meeting or hi, and they're really, really generic. The worst case scenario is they're blank. If I get an email that's a blank subject line, I just delete it. What you want to make sure is you have a great killer subject line, because if your email doesn't have a great subject line and it doesn't get opened, you're dead in the water. So how do you have a great subject line? You can have something that's a newsworthy hook that gives people a real strong reason to open it. A lot of times we'll start with the recipient's name so they know it's their action. We see in a lot of emails that we get, I'm sure you get, there's 10 people on the email, there's 5 people or 3 people on the to line, 7 people on the CC. Nobody knows that who really has to take action on it. So I put the person's first name in the very beginning, like in the example below, it says Beno, referred by Despina. So they know it's their action. When they see that email sitting in their inbox, they know it's their action to take on that email. And if it's a referral from someone, I'll include the referrer's name, and we suggest you do that too. So it says in this example, Beno, referred by Despina regarding MRI and tissue identification. So it gives my email a lot more credibility because Beno, who maybe doesn't know me very well or doesn't know you very well, if you were referred by somebody they know, your open rate's going to go up dramatically just by doing that simple thing. Last example I wanted to talk to, and I know we go a little long on this, but email we find is your huge connection point to making a difference between customers, partners, and investors, and you've got to be great at email to be a successful entrepreneur. So sorry for going long on this, but we think it's critically important, and hence why we talk about this content very early. The last thing to keep in mind is if that email is getting opened on this device for the first time and it's coming in the email client on a smartphone, just realize that the recipient is only going to see about the first 30 characters of your subject line. So that means you really have to pack a punch in the first 30 characters because otherwise it's very little stands between you and getting swiped and deleted or just completely ignored. So think about when you're writing an email. So let's go back for a moment. Break the ice. We do that all the time. We send a LinkedIn request first, then we start to write the email. First thing, have a killer subject line so somebody will open up that email, and we're going to start to get into the body of it in a moment. Remember in that killer subject line, if it's getting delivered to a smartphone type device, the first 30 characters are really, really important. Please keep that in mind. Okay, so you've written a great email, at least the subject line. Let's get into the body of it. And I just want to point out, by the way, I met with an entrepreneur about a month ago who said, you know, I was using these techniques. No one ever used to reply to my email. I started using these techniques, and it was unbelievable. It was a huge difference. People I'd emailed months before, nobody responded to me. I started doing things like this, and it was very easy to break through. So hopefully you'll get similar responses from these type of techniques. Okay, so building a better email body. First thing we like to do, again, early situation, maybe it's an investor, a partner, a customer that you don't know really well or they don't know you. First thing we suggest, make sure you establish credibility. Maybe you're going to talk about companies, people that you've already met with, physicians or educators you've already met with, people that you've partnered with or you're backed by. You know, we're XYZ company and we're backed by Dreamit Ventures, or we've partnered with such and such, this hospital system, this school district, this corporation, or our partner. You want to build as an early stage company credibility so people believe in what you're writing. Also, if you have measurable milestones, we've got 100,000 users, 50,000 users, 12 marquee customers. Are there measurable milestones that you can put in that intro email that gives you instant credibility? So think about that. Next up, make sure to have a concise overview, right? If you see an email that's really, really long, that's not a good thing in an intro email. So that first line is really, really critical. Those first 2 to 5 sentences of a concise overview, if you see the example below to Dr. Palma's, this is something from a couple years ago, an email that I had written. It's really tight, it's really concise. The first couple of sentences really get the point across. The other thing I wanted to mention is an acronym that we like to use is consider bluffing. So in this case, what bluffing means is bottom line up front. Instead of writing a really long email and then maybe the ask is at the very bottom. So I was wondering if you get together when I'm in LA next week, maybe you put that really high up in the top of the email. So a lot of times, if it's a little bit longer, we'll put the bottom line very up front in the email and just kind of get to the point with supporting information, but try to get to the point quickly. Please keep in mind, don't write emails that are great for you, write it that are great for your recipient. So always keep in mind what the audience is going to think, because they are an audience. People that are great at business development are great in breaking through, are great in standing in other people's shoes. So think about it, when you're sending the email, they're going through their mind, what's in it for me, with them, if you don't know that acronym. So what's in it for me? So if you send an email and you don't have a really clear what's in it for me, why should I meet with you? That's not a great thing. So think about when you're writing a great body of an email, answering for your audience or your recipient, what's in it for me? You can use techniques like FOMO, if you're familiar with that, that's fear of missing out. You could say, I've met with the following companies, I've met with the following partners, we've already done this, we're the next big thing. Sometimes we'll build that into an email where somebody said, well, they already met with this university and that university, and they haven't met with us yet, but they seem to be meeting with all of our peers and partners that are in our competitive set. So sometimes you can use a FOMO technique that they feel like they really need to meet with you. The other important thing to put in this email and keeping it audience-centric is what's the ask. A lot of times you'll get through an email, and at the bottom of it, it's not super clear exactly what you want from me if I'm the audience. So just make sure you use this type of checklist when writing an email that you're hitting these points. Make sure to establish credibility, keep it really concise. If it's getting longer, think about bottom line up front, and think about it from the audience's point of view. They are the customer here, they are the recipient. Think about what's in it for them, be clear with the ask. Okay, so we did breakthrough on using things like LinkedIn, killer subject line, have a great body of the email. One of the things I just wanted to point out is an email that I particularly do not like to get. So I would just advise you not use this expression. It's completely up to you. But I'll get emails that say, hey, Steve, you don't know me. I'm a startup entrepreneur. And I was wondering if I could get 30 minutes of your time to pick your brain. Are you available next week? And it is the most lopsided, one-sided email you could possibly send. Because if the recipient's thinking, wow, what's in it for me? There's not much. All they're going to do is get their brain picked. So just a personal note, I hate that expression. I don't like to see other people use it. Please don't send me emails that say that. And I would generally not send emails like that. Again, it's so one-sided. You're going to do value extraction from the person you're meeting with, but it's not really clear what they're going to get. So try to make it a little more two-sided, not one-sided with can you pick your brain. When you're writing those great emails, just keep in mind a couple points about language that you use in an email that's even brief. Try to make your sentences really short. So trim long, hard to read sentences. Avoid too many adverbs. That's a problem I have. I get so excited in my emails. It's adverbs on adverbs. Try to limit them. Use the active voice instead of the passive voice. If you remember that from when you had English in high school, you want to show active language. And just try to be careful about using highfalutin language. Like, will your audience really understand the terminology and the words you use? Look, if you're doing something deep in medicine or deep in some type of ed tech technology, hopefully they'll understand, but try to write it in a kind of a plain English so it's really, really clear what your point is, what you're doing, your value proposition, and what you're looking for. There's software like Hemingway Editor and other services out there, by the way, if you ever wanted to pass your email through, that'll give you feedback on the quality and the readability and the clarity of your email. If it's a really important email, I'll grab somebody at Dreamit and say, hey, could you do me a favor? Can you read through this? Does it make sense? And I do that once a week, where I just want to make sure that it all makes sense. Okay, so some other techniques to think about. Again, I know it's a lot on email, but I find that most people suck at email, and we try to change that at Dreamit because it just makes a world of difference. We had an example, by the way, of a Dreamit community portfolio company last week that had a meeting on the West Coast of the United States with an unbelievable opportunity, an unbelievable top 5 prospect for them. And I went over to the entrepreneur that's running the company. I said, by the way, just curious, how did you get connected with them? And they just turned around and smiled and said, Email Ninja. Actually, I just sent him a cold email, but used every technique you talk about and had an unbelievable meeting. So anyway, next thing about writing the body of it, just please avoid the TLDR issue, too long, didn't read. Just think about it, like if you personally think about emails that you get that are like a page of text, a page and a half of text, the bigger it is, the more you're like, you know what, I'll get to it later. And you just close it and maybe you mark it on red, maybe you don't. But the longer it is, the worse off your response rate's gonna be. So really try to crush emails down to the most critical things. So bullet information where it makes it easier to read. So can you bullet things out so it's much more digestible and shorter and clearer? A lot of times I'll write an email and I'll write it and then I kind of put it down for a moment, bring it back up, and then I try to cut it in half and see if I can get rid of 50% of the text. And surprisingly, every single time, I can usually get 30, 40, 50% of the text out of it. Again, if I don't do this for every single email, these are particularly for new people I've never worked with, new people I'm trying to break through to, that type of thing. So I really try to crush it down. Sometimes I'll take an email, and if I'm using Airmail on my Macintosh or certain applications, I'll take the email and I'll actually narrow and skinny down the window. So I kind of look at it in smartphone mode to see what does that email really look like. I'm assuming most of the time the first place my email is read is in a smartphone. So I'll skinny it down and see, does it look really, really long? How does it actually lay out on the page? And then I'll try to cut it in half again. So again, really try to, and I'm sorry I'm not doing this on this slide, really try, get to the point. Keep it narrow, keep it tight, get to the point. Okay. At the bottom of your email, you'll do me and a lot of other people a great service if you put your signature to work. So think of your signature being somewhere between 3 and 7 lines, usually around 3 lines. What are the essentials you should have in your signature? Because in your signature, you want to make it really clear, who are you and how do I reach you? We see this all the time. I get emails all the time from people, and especially if I'm running into a meeting and trying to find someone's email so I can find their phone number and I can't find their phone number anywhere. You want it to be easy to be found, easy to be reached. In your email signature, please make sure you have your name and your title in there, like what's your role? What's your email address? That's not as critical because it's in the email itself, but it's a nice thing to do. What's your phone number in international format? So a number of you watching today are in Israel, you're in Mexico, you're in the United States, you're in Canada. For those that are in the United States, we tend to be very US centric and forget there's other parts of the world that have different country codes. So I always put my email, my phone number, even in with the country code. So great to format it that way. Most of you are going to be building very international businesses, so great to get started right that way and have it right in your email that way. If you're a heavy Skype user, put it right in, but just have a really clear subject line. I completely don't love when people put JPEG images of their signature or put all kinds of graphics in. No images, no attachments. You also don't want the little paperclip going off in people's email because it looks like there's work and a big attachment just by putting the signature. Just put it in plain text. It also makes it easier to copy and paste your signature into other things if people want to move it to a contact management system. If you wanted to as well, you can promote timely events and news in the bottom of your email signature. So that's all on signatures. So great killer subject line that's going to get people to open your email. Really concise body. Great signature at the end, so you're easy to reach. People know who you are. It doesn't just say sent from my iPad or sent from Outlook. Have a rich signature in there. Simple to do, simple change to make. Makes life easier for particularly your recipient. Think about when you're doing emails, what's the best time of day to send it? Some of you may already know this, just doing from mass emailing. And by the way, this is not mass emailing, right? This is sniping. These are individual emails to individual people. You can still keep in mind, though, when's a great time to send. So try to think about what's downtime, when it'd be a great time for people to get and see their email. So when are they active on social media or not active on social media? That would be easier to break through. A lot of times people aim for midweek because Monday morning, they'll get that Monday morning crush of email at 9 in the morning and you just get lost in it. Before and after lunch is a very popular time when people heavily check email. It can be a great time to break through. And one of my favorites, it just seems like a lot of people that I work with around the world, Sunday evenings, I find a lot of people around 6 p.m., their local time zone, will start checking email, getting ready for the week. So I have actually quite a few times I'll email on an early Sunday evening as a way of breaking through. Last thing to keep in mind about when to send, just remember, don't think about yourself, think about your recipient. Right? So what's the time zone they're in? Are they in Israel? Are they in Paris? Are they in LA? So are you sending an email that it's 3 in the morning their time, or is it 9 in the afternoon or 9 in the evening? So just think about the time zone when you're figuring out when to send. Okay, so a lot of times you're going to be sending emails, we're going to make intros, you're going to meet other people, and one of the big things you're going to want to do is get a meeting and a call. Again, so let me give you some very specific recommendations that are very time tested and highly effective for getting meetings and calls. And you're going to see, by the way, we're going to be putting more work on you instead of the recipient, because everybody always seems to put the work on the recipient, and that usually ends poorly. So if you want to get a meeting and call, a couple things to think about. First of all, if you're trying to get a meeting with someone, ask for 15 to 20 minutes maximum, and I mean maximum. The joke, there was one team in the last cycle, Dreamit, they called them TMMs. I was like, what's a TMM? 20-minute meeting. So anyway, you can go for 20-minute meetings. We find it's with asking for that lower level of commitment when you're emailing and saying, hey, I was wondering if we could get together for 20 minutes. It's an easy chunk of time for someone to potentially give up. 30 minutes makes a difference, a big difference. I would almost never ask for an hour. An hour is asking for an eternity. So we tend to ask for 20-minute meetings. If you're very good at what you do, you can get in and out in 20 minutes. The other thing that I find is if the meeting is going well, a 20-minute meeting bleeds into 30 minutes anyway, or even longer. So just ask for 20 minutes, much greater chance you're going to get that high-value meeting that you want anyway. In that email, what we suggest is offer specific dates and times in your email of when you want to get together. So this is to Dr. Feldman, and asking him some questions. He's in pathology at Penn Medicine. So in this, if you notice in this email, which was local, I was in Philadelphia at the time. He was in the Philadelphia at the time. It's an actual email that I had written, or I guess Mo wrote it, and I was CC'd on it. But if you look, it says, hey, are you available Wednesday between 1:30 and 4:30, Thursday between these times? And it says above, could you speak for 20 minutes during one of these blocks? A lot of times I see entrepreneurs send an email saying, hey, I was wondering if you're available to get together for a meeting. Can you let me know what's good for you? Now you're putting the majority of the work on the recipient to go look at their calendar, compile times, figure it out. It is so much easier. Give them a few options, let them say yes to one. It just makes it easier and faster to get a meeting to fit it in. If you're working with people that are in other time zones, make sure to indicate the time zone for the meeting in their time zone, not yours. So if I'm trying to meet with somebody who's in Palo Alto or Menlo Park, or I'm meeting with somebody who's in Houston, I'll put it in Central Time or Pacific Time. I don't put it in Eastern Time and try to make them do the work. So again, make it easier. Everything is towards the audience of the person you're trying to meet with. If you're working with an international audience, again, for those of you that are from the States and spend a lot of time in the States, you forget that other people around the world format dates differently, or I would say we format dates in the United States differently than everyone else. Everybody else typically does the day of or the date and then the month, you know, the 3rd of June, the 6th of March. So one of the problems that you want to be careful of, like this one, if you see below, in the email example on the right, Wednesday 9/17, I'm in Philly, he's in Philly, we're all in the US, all good, so I'm doing it that way. But a lot of times I'll spell out, you know, March the 6th or June the 3rd, because if you just say, hey, I was wondering, I'm coming to Tel Aviv, are you available to meet on 3/6? Is that March the 6th or June the 3rd? Which way do I read that? So we just clear out all of the confusion, make it really clean and simple. So if you're trying to get a meeting and a call, ask for 20 minutes, don't ask for longer, unless you really, really desperately need longer. Offer specific dates and times, be cognizant of your audience, their time zone, and the way they format dates. And typically we'll just write it out no matter what. So there's no confusion by just using numbers. Okay. Let's keep going. It's a lot on email, but we're gonna make the world a better place and make inboxes better and help you break through much more effectively. So next up, these are lots of tricks and traps. You'll see, and many of you have seen from me, if you were emailing with me or some of people from Dreamit, you'll see sometimes we'll modify the subject lines. Let me tell you why we do that. I want to keep emails moving along because I find in things like Gmail products and other email clients, right, the email goes into a conversation, the conversation starts building, and you can't really see, have I replied to that email or not, you know, what's going on. So we break the conversation by actually modifying the subject line of the email. If you're wondering how to do that in products like Gmail, you go into it and you say edit subject line. There's a pull down in the Gmail web interface on how to do this. So we'll make the action or next step in that email extremely obvious at the very start of the subject line. That's the modification. Remember when you're doing this, those first 30 characters, if you're in a smartphone, are important. So here's this email back and forth with Dr. Feldman in pathology, and it said, you know, this was an intro, can we get together? Now the subject has been modified. It says meet 9/17 at 3:30 p.m. So now we're narrowing down on exactly what's going on. He can see right from it exactly what's going on. It just really, you're gonna find your emails get a lot better responses. I meet people all the time. I send emails and no one ever gets back to me. It's because they're getting lost. People don't know what's going on. And you can almost put that next step is right in the very, very beginning of the subject line, keeping it really, really short. Again, for those of you that emailed me, you'll see I do this quite often if it's a long, complicated discussion. It helps keep things moving along. Okay, let me keep going. Again, we're gonna take questions still at the end. It'll just make it easier if you let me roll through this. And I appreciate everybody's patience with the previous technical issues. Okay, so let me tell you a couple of techniques we use. We find extremely effective for creating urgency, that if you're trying to break through on email, again, it's a venture partner, it's a venture capitalist, it's a partner you want to meet with, a customer you want to meet with. So some of the techniques that we use. So a geographic forcing function. So if I'm trying to get meetings with certain people, or you're trying to get meetings with high value targets and you're traveling to a meeting, how about you fill your dance calendar for the day, your dance card for the day, and fill your calendar with a whole string of high value meetings in that city. So a lot of times we'll use a geographic forcing function. So for example, Last week, I was up in Boston or Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I had one meeting to start with. There were a bunch of other companies I really did want to meet with. By the time I was done, I had 4 meetings instead of just 1. How? I said, I'm going to be in Boston for the day. I'm only there from 10 in the morning till 4. I have a couple other things scheduled. Is there a chance, you could fit in a discussion for 20 minutes? And I use that, I'll be in San Jose, I'll be in Zurich, I'm only there for a day. Is there a chance I could grab 20 minutes and we could catch up over a cup of coffee? It can be very effective. If you're traveling for a meeting, it'll really break open doors to get a quick meeting. We talked about FOMO already, fear of missing out. If you're trying to create urgency and you're trying to get in to meet with a university, a healthcare system, whatever, a retailer, whatever it may be, you can mention gently some of the competitors potentially you've met with or some of the other people in the space. So people like, wow, this company is meeting with all of these universities or these healthcare systems. They're pulling down some big names. We should find out what's going on here, a little bit of a FOMO. Additionally, to create urgency, you can also use credibility. So I've been in situations where I was trying to meet with someone in Milan, Italy. And the company I was meeting with in Milan, Italy, why was I in Italy? I was in Turin, which is very close, meeting with Fiat. Well, I'm going to be in Turin next week, meeting with Fiat. Do you have a chance while I'm coming through Milan to meet? It just adds credibility to the situation. Or I have to be interviewed on CBS News in LA. I'm going to be in town and was wondering if you could get 20 minutes of your time. Again, it gives you credibility. It's all about breaking through, getting those early meetings, investors, customers, partners. So that's about creating urgency. Okay, we're going to transition a little bit. Let me just check time. And we're going to keep going. It's a little modification of email. It's your calendar entry, but we're going to show you how to be killer at this as well. I've actually had other VCs that I'll meet with, 1 or 2 remarks saying, Steve, it's such a delight to work with you over email and calendar and stuff. It's like, it's so clean, it's so fast. You want to have that same impact on people, that you're just easy to deal with. Things are really clear right down to your calendar entries. So let me show you what we do in calendar entries. So I want to have the specific subject line so it makes sense and shows up on everyone's calendar. And I'll also indicate the attendees in the subject line. I know that you have the attendees lower down on the screen, but I'll put in there, Steve and Mo from CHOP doing an imaging spin-out, meeting with Ari Brooks from Penn Oncology at the Tissue Center, and you can see the location in here as well. So here's what I want you to avoid. I'll have an email calendar entry where somebody's getting on my calendar, and I literally, once a month these days still, I'll have a calendar entry, shows up on my calendar, somebody sends me an invite, it says meeting with Steve Barsh. Yeah, I know that. That's wonderful. That's me. Who am I meeting with? So just make sure that subject line is very specific, and you can show everybody. It doesn't, if you're meeting with 10 people, you need to show everyone, but really be indicative and clear and very specific in the subject line of that email or subject line of the calendar entry, excuse me. Detailed location information, right down to the address, suite, and floor. That's particularly great when you're using Google products and other products to have the address in there. That usually means you're 1 button click away from mapping. A lot of systems are automatically telling you if there's traffic on the way, if you have that information in there. It's super helpful. Right down to the suite number, what floor you're meeting on. We'll put all of that in the location information. Super, super helpful. Because otherwise you're scrambling, you're running from meeting to meeting, you're in a city, you're meeting with customers, you're like, wait, where am I meeting them? Just put it in there, makes everybody's life easier. If it's a phone call, put the phone number directly in there because you want to avoid scrambling at the last minute. What's the person's phone number? For conference calls, put the conference number in there with the bridge and the access and the pen. How many times have you struggled? How many times have other people struggled? So just put that all in there, make it a really rich calendar entry so you're really easy to quote unquote do business with. The other thing that we'll do sometimes, and we suggest that you do, is take relevant notes from the email and drop them, take relevant pieces of the body of the email and just drop it right in the notes for the calendar entry. That way you or somebody else can pre-read, like, if you have a packed day and you've got 6 meetings, you can quickly read on your phone on the way in, what's this meeting about? What was the discussion? Just really helps. So you want a really, really rich calendar entry. Next thing I want to talk about, again, this is now getting into some more subtle etiquette related to emails, is CCing people, and BCCing people. So just a little bit of a pet peeve and something that you want to make sure that you're doing correctly. If somebody CCs a group of people, unless you have really good reason, make sure to do a reply all. Usually people are trying to keep a whole bunch of people into the conversation. So think about when you'll send an email to 3 or 4 people, and then just the person just does a reply and breaks the chain, and you have to reassemble the chain. So just think about if somebody is, again, CCing lots of people, do a reply all unless you have a very specific reason not to. So CCs, that's a good thing, reply all. BCCs, generally, big suggestion for you, don't BCC people. I don't know if you know what it stands for. It's blind carbon copy. That's where the email recipient gets a copy of it, but no one sees they got a copy of it. I have seen time and again how that comes back to haunt people and companies. They BCC a board member because they reached out to the company and the board member is somehow related to the company, and the board member does a reply all to something they were BCC'd on, and they come out of hiding, and it just looks ridiculous. So number one, if you want to BCC someone, don't. Go into your sent email, forward it to them, and be done with it, but don't BCC. The only case where you should BCC as an email ninja is if you're moving someone to BCC. Let's say myself or Phil or Andrew or Avi or Mo from Dreamit or somebody else from Dreamit makes an intro to you to another organization. You can say in the very opening line, moving Steve to BCC to free up his inbox, and that's fine to do. But besides that, if you're trying to move someone else off, so if you want to move someone out of the conversation to free up their inbox, find a BCC so everybody sees that you're doing it, and the BCC person sees they're being moved off the conversation. Besides that, don't use them. They're dangerous. I've seen it bite people in the ass multiple times where they look really dumb because of BCC. Okay, a little bit more etiquette. And again, time-tested techniques that just seem to work really frickin' well. Asking for introductions. It's a special form of email, so let's go through it. So what you want to do generally, again, from the recipient and people you're working with, is don't make work for other people. So if you want an intro, like if you say to Steve, hey, I was wondering if you could make an intro to such and such, I saw you're connected with them, or I saw you were speaking with them, fine. Just make it easy for me, or make it easy with a partner or VC or whomever you're meeting with, the customer. So you can say, here's a short overview. Here's one short, quick paragraph that you could forward that's a quick overview. Don't make me do the work, just like I wouldn't make you necessarily doing the work if the shoe was on the other foot. So write a really short overview of the entire email. And then if you were in a meeting with someone and you said, hey, could you make an email intro? You can just remind people of the context of what that intro is all about. Now, if you want to be a super ninja and be able to walk across paper and not leave marks, so to say, think about a self-intro. So we'll talk, and you'll see this in the talk about meeting with customers. We talk about this. All highlighted is here as well. So a technique we started seeing companies use, and we use as of a year or two ago, is you'll be in a meeting with a customer or a partner, and maybe they said, there's 1 or 2 people I think you should speak with. And we'll ask you to say, that's great. Do you mind if I do a self-intro? Maybe you get the email address from the person you're meeting with. You probably, if you're an email ninja, you don't even need the email address because it's so easy to figure out anyway. And what I've said to people, I'll say, hey, there's those 2 people you suggested I speak with. If you don't mind, do you mind if I just do a self-intro? What I'm going to do is I'm going to send that person that you suggested I talk to, I'm going to send them an email. I'm going to refer to you, like in the subject line, and I'll CC you on it, but I don't want to make any extra work for you. I don't even need you to do the email intro. I'll do it myself, but I'll CC you. 9 times out of 10, people will say, sure, that's fine, because you're not making work for them. It's so much easier for you, because instead of you having to email them and then follow up with them and say, hey, did you do the intro yet? Just do it yourself. Remove them out of the way. It's just wonderful. It's great. So think about just self-introing yourself. It works extremely effectively. Just remember, if you're doing things like that, it's great to modify the subject line of the email. So it says, Beno referred by Despino, which exactly was the situation here when this email went out. It was just a self-intro. Really powerful, and gets people out of the intro business, and it's really, really great. Okay, we're pretty much done, and then I'll open it up for questions. So some key takeaways that I want you to think about, and if you wanted one slide to stick up on your wall about being great at email. So create a rich LinkedIn profile and break the ice with it. You'll see us do that all the time. We break the ice with LinkedIn. And you'll see a lot of times, like if I'm emailing somebody, it's somebody I don't know, I'll send them a LinkedIn request. I'll modify the body of that LinkedIn request so it's not just like, hey, I'm building my network. I'll modify it, and then the next email in their inbox, 9 times out of 10, is going to be the email from me, which is the real email saying, by the way, Steve Barsh from Dreamit, coming to here, meeting with you, love to get together. Do you have time? Here's some time slots that are available. and we'll do that. So it'll be like 1, 2. It's that LinkedIn, and then boom, right after it is the email once I've broken the ice. Have a killer subject line, right? Really, really killer, that it's a compelling reason to open your email, because if they don't, you're dead in the water. Build a concise, credible, compelling body so it gets read, it's very to the point, it's got a really clear ask. Once you get those meetings, remember we suggested all the things about adding the meeting times in there and putting you doing the work and suggesting meeting times, make scheduling with you really, really easy. Have rich calendar entries and all that we talked about. To keep the email moving along, if the discussion's slightly changing over the email, think about modifying the subject line where you add a few extra characters and you put a little chevron as the discussion's moving along. And just remember, if you're getting an email and a bunch of people are CC'd, unless you have really good reason, do a reply all, don't break the CC chain, and generally be really, really careful not to BCC people unless you're moving someone out of the email traffic and clearing up their inbox. It's just a very dangerous thing to do. Okay, that's breaking through with email. Sorry, some of the technical issues in the beginning. Again, we wanted to go over this now because when we're doing intros, we find it's really important to do a great job at it and be able to. We need you to break through. I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point. Hopefully, you see me again. There's about 30 people on this webinar right now. Douglas has just come back on, and we're going to open it up for questions. When you come up for questions, as a reminder, just use if you have a question, use the raise your hand feature, raise my hand or raise your hand in Zoom. Give us a couple seconds. Douglas will pull you up. It takes about 2 or 3 seconds to switch you on. And then when you come on, if you just remind us your name, company, where you're from in the world, and we'll see you, many of you at Destination Dreamit next week, but great to just know who you are. Are there any questions? We'll just wait for the first question if there are.
And Steve, this would be a good time to announce again, just to apologize for the problems we were having. We will have a clean version of this production that will be available on the YouTube channel as of 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Okay. And I'm like, just in case everybody else didn't hear that, I don't know if you heard Douglas's voice. I certainly heard it. By 3 p.m. Eastern time, for international, those people that are international, by 3 p.m. Eastern time, we'll have a clean version of that presentation pushed up to our YouTube channel. Surprise supplies, we'll notify you on Slack, not on email. Please make sure you're on Slack. That means Slack is running on your desktop. It's running on your smartphone as well. We'll push up a copy of the slides independently of the presentation. If you just want to go through the slides, they'll be up online as well.
Steve, we have a question coming from Doug Messer, so I'm going to bring him up.
Okay, great, thanks. Hi, Doug, you're on mute, and hopefully you'll come off mute. Douglas, there you are. Doug, how are you?
Guys, well, doing all right. Have pneumonia, but still listening in.
Okay.
What are your
That's
thoughts?
hardcore, by the way. Okay.
What are your thoughts on late night emails? I'm a late night worker, usually till 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
And we always debate back and forth whether we should wait or send those emails in the morning. What are your thoughts?
No, it's a good question. I tend to work late too. And by the way, if I was your parents, it'd be like, no wonder you have pneumonia. You're all run down. You have to get some sleep. Sorry.
Oh, I've heard it.
I'm sure. A lot of us work really hard. I don't know. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I want to make sure I'm not proving a point. Like if somebody, some high-level executive or VC, it depends on what point you're trying to make. If they see the timestamp says 3 in the morning, it's like, why are they emailing at 3 in the morning? It can be a good thing and a bad thing. And by the way, people have no idea. You might be 3 in the morning and you're in California, but it's a different time zone, so they don't really know. I don't know. I mean, you can try. I find some of those, there's some really sweet spot times a day. My favorite lately is just the Sunday evening. It just seems like people are on their email Sunday, 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night is a sweet spot for me. You can give it a try if it works for you and the type of companies you're reaching out to. Give it a try. You'll certainly be in most people's first read of email in the morning. You'll be if you're sending it 3 in the morning. I would just see, your mileage may vary. See what works for you. Those would be my thoughts.
Really appreciate it.
Okay. Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. We have another question. Hold on one second.
Yep. And I just want to read a comment that I saw come up on the chat. I'm going to read it. It's from Brad Schiller, who put it on the chat. It was really cool. Boomerang email, I've used that Gmail ad, and I actually haven't used it recently. Boomerang, which is a Gmail plugin, and we could throw that information on Slack as well if you're not seeing it on chat, enables you to schedule your emails to be sent in the future. Boomerang does a couple things. So if you wanted to actually write the email and say, have it go at 6, Douglas, I can hear you, by the way. Have that email go at 6:31 in the morning, you can actually schedule the email to hit at a certain time. Okay, Douglas?
Yes, if anyone has any questions, if you can go ahead and raise your hands again. We had a slight hiccup. So again, I see people chatting away, but if you have any questions, just raise your hand and we'll bring you up to a panelist.
Okay, wait a couple more minutes. See if anybody else has any questions. Let me close my chat window. Okay. Yep. Hello, Freddie. Okay, we just need to bring your audio up. 1 second. There you are. Freddie, you're on. Vids is up. How are you? Can you hear us, Freddie?
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Again, this is Freddie from Suggestic here in San Francisco for everybody. So you've been talking, by the way, this is great presentation.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a BD guy, and it's like, oh my God, there is so much I need to brush up and clean up. So thank you for that. So quick on, you've been talking about updating our LinkedIn page.
Yeah.
So how do you recommend us to feature Dreamit? Do we put it as a group? Do we put it as a class? What's your recommendation?
It's a great question. I don't know. Let me talk to some of the other people in the Dreamit team. Can I answer that on Slack and I'll get the answer out to everyone?
Yes.
It's attached to the Dreamit group, or do you say part of Dreamit? I'm not sure what our favorite way to do that is.
Okay.
I'll make a note and thank you. It's a great question. We'll make sure to follow up on Slack and see which way we want you to do it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. Great idea. Okay, cool. You're up, Vids. There you are.
Hi, everybody. Hello. This is Vidar.
Yep, and what company you're working, what city and what company you're working on? I know, but they don't.
Yes. Hi, I'm Vidar. I'm working with Keratin, and we are a healthcare startup based out of Philadelphia, very close to the Dreamit office, just 2 blocks away.
Yeah.
This is incredible information, Steve. Thank you so much for sharing this. I had just one quick point. This was taught to me back in my school days, and I think it's been really helpful just to everybody. Do not ever put your 2s and CCs and VCCs before you write the email. Like sending out blank email is such a disaster. So the last thing you should do is just put the 2 and the CCs. Just a note. Thank you.
Okay, I will. That's a great trick. I'll have to try to put that into the deck. Right, where you're sitting there kind of writing a draft and you meant to say save and you accidentally hit send and it's all loaded up and it goes to everybody and it's like, oh shit, it wasn't done and out it goes. So that's a great point. A great tip. Great tip.
Sure. Thank you. All right.
Cool. Thanks. See you next week. Is that Brad dialed in?
Yep. One quick thing on that response. You can actually set your Gmail to delay sending the email automatically. So that way, if you accidentally hit send, you can kind of grab it and get it out of the send queue before that even happens. But the other thing is, I had a question on attachments.
Yeah.
So let's say you're doing an initial email to somebody. I've in the past kind of included an attachment for like just more information about the company. Do you feel that is something that we shouldn't do, or maybe include a link to that attachment, either on our website or on Dropbox or something would be more effective?
So it's a great question, Brad. And Brad, what company you're from and where are you from?
Sorry, Prompt from New York City.
Cool, thank you. I kind of know most of you, but it's just for everybody else to know. So great question. So generally, again, I generally avoid attachments for a number of different reasons. It just makes it look like there's work there. If it's an initial email, a lot of times I'll just try to get in my overview paragraph, be really, really tight. Sometimes you'll want to include almost like a sell sheet or a one-pager. Generally what we tend to do, and I'll just tell you what we find is best practices is, like you said, a link to Google Drive, a link to Dropbox. A lot of times we'll use DocSend with several of you. You may have seen things come, DocSend spelled DOCSEND, and we'll compile kind of additional traps tricks and traps and get them out to you. So a lot of times we use DocSend, so we can actually see have people gone into the document and gives us some additional analytics. But generally we avoid attachments, or we'll say to people in that initial email, here's a quick overview paragraph. You get the points across, and you could say, if you'd like, happy to send you a one-pager and let them ask for it. So generally we stay away from it. Some other people like to have that short one-pager. We certainly stay away from having a really long deck. You want something tight and to the point, is we find just increases the open rate and the response rate.
Great, thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions? And great suggestions and great questions. I mean, all of us are all learning all the time, so appreciate everybody's input. That delayed send, by the way, I just want to comment real quick on that. Delayed send for Gmail, I forget where that setting is. I'll have to look myself. I also use, I don't know if any of you are using Google's new Inbox product. The Inbox app, I use it on my iPhone, and I use Google Inbox on the web version. First of all, is a really great product. As well, the other thing is it also has a little bit of that delayed send. You can actually recall an email. I think if you catch it within the first 10 seconds, you can say unsend. So it gives you about 10 seconds to go through that holy shit moment and actually pull the email back. I forget how to do it on Gmail, but I know Inbox has the.
Steve, I'm showing that it's currently 12 o'clock.
Okay.
We're having viewers still, participants are still online, but we don't have any other questions at this point.
Okay.
I'm going to give one last opportunity for any questions or thoughts, and then we can close out the webinar for today.
Okay, cool. If there's any other questions, please come up and hit the raise your hand button. Again, we'll post the stream or the video, the clean one, actually. It's probably even a little better than what we just saw. We want to give you the highest quality. We'll post that by 3 p.m. Eastern time today. We'll post the deck itself if you want to use any of the checklists. We try to write a lot of our decks in very checklist, no bullshit, tricks and traps form. We'll get that up. We'll get the answer to the question about how should you link into Dreamit, into the group or whatever. We'll answer that question as well. And if not, I know there's a couple other things on the schedule this week. Please keep up on Slack. Make sure your Slack profile is on. You've got Slack running on your desktop and on your smartphone. Your Gus profile is filled in. We're setting up meetings and getting things ready for you in Destination Dreamit.
Just a reminder about we have our webinar for tomorrow scheduled at the same time with Andrew Ackerman.
Yep. Andrew will be on, one of the managing directors. He's up in New York. He'll do a webinar tomorrow for you. It'll be great. We also, as Douglas has pointed out, they're generally at 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. In case you're wondering why most of the things, there's a little bit of logic to why we do them. 11 o'clock in the morning is 8 o'clock Pacific time for those companies like Freddie. He's up in California this morning, so it's 8 o'clock. And then we have people in from Tel Aviv. They are +7 Eastern time, so it's 6 p.m. 6 p.m. local time for them in the evening, or 1800. So we try to pick 11 o'clock because we think it's equal. It's as equal as we can make it for all the different time zones we're dealing with for this cohort. The other thing just to please remember is a number of the companies, we talked to all of you saying, for those that are particularly 0-0 companies, you have to be with us for the first 3 weeks, you have to be with us for the last 3 weeks. When people may go into hybrid mode, some companies will be for part of the duration of Dreamit for the 4 months. They're going to go back to the local host country. It's why we picked this time spot, because it's kind of equal across all of it for those that are running in hybrid mode. Even when we do live real-time panels, we'll do them roughly at this time of day, so it's kind of equal for everyone. And again, everything's going to be recorded. If you miss the stream, you can pick it up on the private YouTube channel. We'll post to Slack. So it seems like there's no more questions. We appreciate everybody's help and patience, on the call today. Sorry about some of those technical difficulties. We'll get those ironed out. We appreciate everybody's input. If you have questions, hit us on Slack. We look forward to seeing you next week. Andrew will be on tomorrow, 11 o'clock Eastern. And we just wanted to get some of these things out of the way during onboarding week to spin you guys up so you're ready when we're face-to-face starting next week. Thanks for everybody's time. Have a super day, and thanks for tuning in. Talk to you later. Bye.